Hey Star Trek fans, yesterday we got a surprise trailer for Star Trek Lower Decks from the folks over at CBS. Let's take a look at that. Hey everyone, I'm Dan Gunther, and in this video I have a complete breakdown of the recent Lower Decks trailer from CBS, scene by scene, not quite frame by frame, but pretty darn close. I've got Easter eggs, I've got all the alien races that are shown in it, at least the ones that I am aware of, and some insights into a bunch of the scenes that we see in the trailer in preparation for the release of Star Trek Lower Decks on August 6th. So let's jump right in and take a look at the trailer. I will of course have a link in the description below to where you can see the trailer for yourself, both in the US and Canada. Still, as of this recording, no word on international distribution, but I've got to imagine that is coming soon. I know I keep saying that over and over. Hopefully that is true, and our friends overseas will know where and when they can watch Lower Decks. So as the trailer starts out, we get this overhead shot of the USS Cerritos, and we discover that the registry is NCC 75567. So we had some speculation on the Positively Trek podcast with Bruce Gibson that the registry number might be the zip code for Cerritos, California. That does not appear to be the case. Not sure where they get this number from exactly. Most of the registry numbers in recent Trek have had some sort of backstory behind them, a little bit of a kind of in-joke for why they were chosen. Number-wise, it makes sense for where it fits in the chronology. This series takes place the year after Star Trek Nemesis, and 75567 is just a little bit further ahead than Voyager, for example, 74656. So, it fits in that time period. The actual digits themselves, though, I'm assuming there's some sort of significance there, either personally to Mike McMahon or someone else on the production team. Hopefully we figure out what that is. In particular, though, this is a great view of the ship, kind of giving us a bit more of a sense of the proportion and the kind of geometry of the ship than that single shot that we got on the poster. The overall layout is kind of apparent here as well, and that kind of deflector dish assembly is a little bit further back than I would have thought from the first picture. And I gotta say, I really like this. I like how it feels. I think this actually has the feel of a Starfleet ship much more than what I got from the original picture, which I liked, but this one feels more kind of in keeping with how Star Trek ships look. And we'll see a few more views of the ship throughout the trailer that kind of illustrate what I mean here. We also get this shot of the rear of the ship and the first look at the impulse engines and a good look at the warp engines. I do, like I say, I really like this ship. I think the more I see it, the more it grows on me, and the way it's moving in this trailer as well really just evokes that feeling of a Starfleet ship for me. Over top of these shots, we get kind of a captain's log narration, and we find out, of course, that it is not the captain making this log, but Ensign Boimler, one of the four main characters and one of the lower deck ensigns that make up the crew of the Cerritos. And while he's recording this log, he's burst in on by Ensign Mariner, played by Tawny Newsome, and she's kind of laughing at him making a fake captain's log, showing, he has aspirations beyond his station here, right? He wants to be a captain someday. We'll see some other stuff later in the trailer that points to that. And I like this interplay between them. I like the kind of ribbing that she gives him here. This is kind of an interesting establishing of their relationship, that kind of back and forth they've got where he is a stickler for the rules and really wants to follow all the regulations, and she's more of a free spirit, more of a kind of loose cannon type character. This seems to be taking place in a kind of medical supply closet. If you look in the background, those canisters have kind of Starfleet medical symbols on them. I'm not sure if this is close to sickbay or what. There's cases and Starfleet equipment and that sort of thing. But the next interesting thing is this kind of fight rolls out into the corridor, and we see this bin here full of a number of different weapons, and we see kind of a bloodied bat'leth is kind of the most obvious one. However, I want you to take a look at this here, and I may be wrong. This looks to be the gauntlet that is worn by Yar and Yarina in the TNG episode Code of Honor, which, interesting choice of episode for a reference to here. Again, if that is in fact what it is, but that tweet earlier by Mike McMahon a while back saying that you should watch every episode of Star Trek before watching Lower Decks. But man, if they're going to Code of Honor, maybe he had a point there. Next, we get a shot of a shuttle approaching the Cerritos, and this shuttle would seem to be carrying Ensign Tendi along with a number of other ensigns. In this shot here, we get Ensign Tendi in the background. You see there, she's an Orion. Next to her, kind of a generic bumpy-headed alien officer. Not sure what species this is exactly supposed to be. He could be kind of any one of a number. We got a human right in the foreground here, and behind him you can see there's an Andorian just kind of peeking out there. I feel like this is Ensign Tendi's introduction to the Cerritos. We hear her saying, praising the ship, saying it's the coolest ship she's ever been on. I think this might be kind of a POV character for the audience. She's been described as kind of Starfleet fangirl, someone who's a big, huge fan of the missions that Starfleet goes on and is kind of geeking out over the opportunity to be on a starship. So I feel like she might be the eyes that we're seeing through and kind of experiencing that wonder as an audience. She's kind of like the Trekkie of the crew, if that makes sense. She's like a Star Trek fan who would be able to go on the Enterprise and see all these crazy new cool things. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. We also get this shot of her looking out a window at presumably the rear of the Cerritos at warp, and we get another kind of look at the geometry of the ship with the deflector dish kind of set back between the warp engines there. But the other thing I want to point out is the actual effect of the warp drive. There is a little bit of that blue glow that we've seen in Discovery and Picard, but it's actually much closer to the standard TNG era warp that we've seen in TNG, DS9, Voyager, and even Enterprise. That just kind of stars streaking the multicolored rainbow stars. There's a little bit of an updated look to it, but it's very much in keeping with that original look of that warp drive. So yeah, seeing that kind of wonder through Tendi's eyes, I think, is going to be a neat way to look at space and look at life in Starfleet. We see her on what may be her first day on the job when she goes to sickbay, and she's spoken to by the doctor, Dr. Tiana, or Anna, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, but she is the chief medical officer of the Cerritos, and she's a Cation, like Maress from the animated series of Star Trek. So kind of going back to that animated roots of Star Trek, the first Star Trek animated series. It's nice to see this species again. I think we saw them again also in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home in the council scenes. But sickbay, this emergency here seems to be there's this black goo of some kind that may be doing something to crew members. I'm almost say they look like zombies or something like that. I'm going to refer to these as zombified crew members later, just as a shorthand. Not sure what this exactly is, but looks kind of interesting. Again, we've got a kind of nondescript, bumpy-headed alien crew member as well there. Not sure what species is supposed to be. That might even be a riff on the joke that like all these alien species are just humans with bumpy foreheads kind of thing. So we get Ensign Tendi getting thrust into the situation. She has to pump this guy's heart. This gentleman here, this mustachioed officer, I think is a lieutenant commander that we see in a scene later in the episode as well. So next we get a bit of voiceover from Ensign Mariner, who seems to be kind of the leader of these group of ensigns here. And she's talking about how she's, good at exploring the final frontier and that sort of thing. We get this great shot here of this shuttle flying over the surface of this planet with these kind of crystalline structures, and there's these interesting floating structures as well. I love the backgrounds and the designs for the series. The people, the designs, they're fairly simplistic. They're not incredibly detailed, but at the same time, the backgrounds and what we see of the sets, for lack of a better word, on the ship and on these planets, they're very well thought out, very detailed, and I love the amount of work and care that seems to be going into these. It's not just generic backgrounds. They're really putting a lot of effort into these. Some quick shots here of them doing science. We've got Boimler and Mariner investigating some sort of glowy-eyed alien bug thing here. And we get a glimpse at some of the duty assignments that we might be expected to see these ensigns undertake. And on this pad here, she mentions that she's doing holodeck waste removal. But the other ones that we see on here are carbon filter maintenance, and my favorite, the top one, turbolift lubing. So that's in the canon now. That's a job that needs to be done on Federation starships, lubing up the turbolift shafts. All right. You heard it here first, folks. As I said, Ensign Mariner is assigned to holodeck waste removal, and we do see a little bit of that here, of what that entails, and she's kind of doing the throwing up in her mouth thing as she's removing this waste. I don't really want to know what exactly that is. I think we can make some educated guesses as to, extended use of the holodeck and what kind of waste that would generate, but we're just going to leave that all there for our imaginations. We get this shot of Ensigns Mariner and Boimler on the surface of a Klingon planet, presumably maybe Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. There's some interesting little Easter eggs or design choices in this shot that I want to point to. So first of all, we see Ensign Boimler in a dress uniform, kind of that TNG style of the long dress style uniform that we know from Star Trek The Next Generation. But if you look at the shuttlecraft that's kind of beside the gate that they're walking towards, the one in the background, not the one in the foreground there, that looks to be a TOS style shuttlecraft like the Galileo from the original series. The slight difference being the front, the windows are a little different. They're kind of a wraparound window. But if you look at like the pylon for the warp engine and the shape of it and the door shape as well, that looks to be like they've modeled that on the old style Galileo shuttlecraft from the original series. Kind of a nice, interesting nod there. But if you look across to the other side of the gate to that one where that shuttle we see with the backside pointed to us, that looks to be modeled on the air tram from Star Trek The Motion Picture. This is the shuttle / tram that Kirk arrives at Starfleet headquarters in when we first go to San Francisco at the beginning of that film. So some very deep cuts, either designs meant for us to notice and pick out those Easter eggs, or interesting design choices borrowing from the history of Star Trek, which is kind of cool. So next we get a scene between the captain and Ensign Boimler, and this is again kind of pointing out Boimler's aspirations for the future. The captain asks him, do you see a captain's chair in your future? And he says, I hope so, ma'am. And then we get this shot of what could be the bridge of the Cerritos. It seems that the crew is cheering, but Ensign Boimler is in the middle of the bridge. And this may be kind of a fantasy of his, maybe a holodeck fantasy or something like that, or it might be the actual bridge in some situation or something like that. But references around this one as well. So some Easter eggs here. We've got a Trill officer at the operations station in the front. The one cheering, she kind of looks like she's got baggy eyes. She looks very tired, but she's cheering there. We've got a purple-skinned alien woman at tactical, or at least at the station that's on the backside of that horseshoe there, behind the captain's chair. Not sure what species that could be. Maybe one we've seen before. I can't think. I know maybe there were some purple-skinned freighter captain people in Deep Space Nine, or maybe I'm misremembering, but not sure what species that is. But if you look over to the left-hand side, the second person in from the turbolift door there, that would be a Napian crew member. Napians were first seen in the episode Eye of the Beholder from The Next Generation. I don't think they've been seen since, but Ensign Kwan from that episode was a Napian, and he had that rather prominent forehead appliance there. So very deep cut alien-wise. Glad they're grabbing all kinds of different sources for these aliens here. This next shot shows a nervous Boimler, possibly on the bridge. It looks like the same wall paneling that we see on the bridge, so he's very nervous to be there, next to some officers. Of course, there's a lieutenant next to him, so he's definitely somewhere that's above his pay grade, it would seem, based on the concept of the show. And this kind of cute little scene here where Boimler is talking to Ensign Rutherford, the first time we see him in the trailer, and Boimler is asking if his hair makes him look more promotable like this. So again, he's somebody who's ambitious. He wants to climb the ranks and is worried about making a good appearance and impression to the other officers. So we see a little bit of Rutherford here. He's repairing some sort of console with Ensign Tendi nearby. And then this next shot is interesting. We see animated Borg, which is kind of cool. and Ensign Rutherford taking them on and attacking them and winning quite handily. Now, I think this is probably a holodeck simulation of some kind. We see him standing over the defeated Borg, and the security chief, Lieutenant Shaxis, is complimenting him, saying that he should be security. But we do know from the series concept that Ensign Rutherford very much wants to be an engineer and is passionate about that. So this could be the introduction of an interesting bit of character work for him as well. If he's very good at fighting and security, but he doesn't want to do that, that's not his passion, he wants to be an engineer, there could be some interesting conflict there with, you know, where the direction his life is taking and the skills he's good at and that kind of thing. So some interesting stuff there for sure. I do want to say I love this shot. We get this kind of shot of all four of the main characters, the lower deckers here, and each one of them is kind of showing an aspect of their personality in this one shot. So Tendi, for example, looks to be kind of shy but enthusiastic. She's kind of got that look about her. Rutherford, maybe he's unsure of things or maybe unsure of himself. That's kind of the impression I'm getting from that. Boimler, he's standing at parade rest, right? He follows the rules. He's a straight arrow. You know, hair's a little bit messy, but he's definitely trying to be the model officer, it looks like. And Mariner is more laid back, playful. She's got her sleeves rolled up. She's more laid back, kind of loose and playful there. So I think this really shows their personalities strongly. Now, the next shot, we get a shot of an LCARS display of the ship's schematics. And I love these things because even on the live action show, these shots always have some sort of little Easter eggs in them. Now, I went over this and I was not able to find a little hamster running on a wheel like you would see in the Next Generation one if you looked close enough. But if you look closely, and they make the joke that like, oh, we're up here. No, we're way down here. The lower decks, right? Oh, that's probably where they got the name. But anyway, they're near the shuttle bay when he points that out. And if you look above the three shuttles there are two Argos, and those are the all-terrain vehicles that we see in Star Trek Nemesis that most people did not like. And I think that's funny. I think it's hilarious that there's a reference to them here. Mike McMahon just making the deep cut references. I'm loving this. So fun reference there for sure. Next we see there's going to be, of course, some tension between the higher ranked officers and the lower deckers. We've got Ensign Tendi trying to like shake the hand of this lieutenant possibly. And the lieutenant says, keep it moving, lower decks. You know, maybe that's the kind of nickname that these guys have. And she's taken aback by this and maybe doesn't realize there's that kind of class system a little bit on the starship. So she's kind of learning her place as the other officers would see it. So we get next a hero shot of the main crew, not the main characters, but the senior staff of the USS Cerritos. We've got Commander Ransom on the left, Lieutenant Shaxis in the background there, the captain right up front, and the chief medical officer, as we said, the Cation there. I love this kind of hero shot. The way it's been kind of explained before when Mike McMahon's been asked about it, it's like they think they're the stars of the television show and they're going to act that way. And we'll see that next here with this shot, of course, of Commander Ransom ripping his uniform off and fighting this big, huge Hulk-like alien. Very much shades of Kirk or William Riker or something like that. But they're not the stars of the show. It's these lower deck crew members, of course. And then we get this short scene between Commander Ransom and this lieutenant commander with a mustache here talking about the second contact missions. And I think this is the same officer that we see Tendi pumping the heart of in sickbay. And I don't know if this scene takes place before or after that or what the relationship is here. It's kind of hard to figure out, of course. It's just a trailer. But this seems to be that same character. And they're talking about those second contact missions that the Cerritos undertakes. So like was said before, ships like the Enterprise come in and do the big first contact missions. And then the Cerritos is one of those ships that comes in afterwards and does the logistical type stuff. So not the kind of prestigious assignment that, the Enterprise would be. And so, of course, while the senior staff are having the big adventures up on the bridge, The lower deck officers are doing the menial tasks, so we see them stripping some sort of gunk off of this panel with a phaser or something like that. And then we kind of get into some of the more actiony shots. So I mentioned before the kind of affliction that seemed to be happening to the crew members made them look like zombies. We see in this next shot Lieutenant Shaxis carrying Ensign Boimler, and Ensign Rutherford is with them as well, and they're shoving this thing, and the zombified crew members, for lack of a better term, are fighting them. Next shot we get through the corridor, we see that the captain is with them, as is Ensign Mariner. Not sure what's all over Boimler, this pink goo, but he does not seem to be having a good day. They do make it to sickbay, with Mariner and the captain fighting off the crew members as the sickbay doors close. So an interesting, I don't know if this maybe is from the first episode or something like that, but some sort of emergencies happening. I see black goo. I can't help but think of like Armus from Skin of Evil. Don't know if that's the reference, but you know, it's hard not to think of stuff like that, and especially knowing that Mike McMahon has plans to make really deep cut references. So could be, could maybe not. I don't know. That's just where my mind went. So we get a shot of the view screen, and something on the view screen is heavily damaged, blowing up. I was thinking maybe this could be an escape pod or some other piece of equipment. Not sure what it is, but whatever it is, the ensigns are looking out the window, Boimler and Mariner, and Boimler says, "We're so getting fired for this." So they screwed something up. The next is another gorgeous shot of the Cerritos in orbit of this planet. And again, I just want to call attention to these backgrounds here. So look at the detail on that planet and the lights of the city below. This is gorgeous stuff. I think the animation and the artwork and the design here is just incredible. So I'm really, really looking forward to the artwork and the look of this show much more than I was expecting I would. So very cool. We see these purple fish alien things kind of fearing this exploding planet or moon in their sky. Not sure what's happening here, but you know, some sort of emergency that presumably our ensigns will have to deal with. And then my favorite shot of the ship that we've gotten so far is this beautiful shot from above the saucer, and it kind of zooms in. But this right here is just, this is where it felt the most like a Starfleet, a Star Trek ship to me, in the tradition of the ones we've seen before. This feels really good, and I think there's some really interesting angles and really cool shots they can play with for this ship, but this is beautiful. Then we get a little scene that's been shown to be a favorite of a number of people online, this great little scene in the cockpit of a shuttlecraft, the shuttlecraft Yosemite, and we see Boimler once again in the dress uniform, and there seems to be like ramen noodles or something spilled all over the console, and I guess maybe that's what they're there for, is to clean that up or something like that. Not sure why Boimler's in a dress uniform, but we get this great singing by Tawny Newsome about the blast shield. This is the new shuttlecraft with the blast shield, and she sings this ridiculous little bit, showing Tawny Newsome is a great musician and she has a wonderful voice here. It's just this silly little scene, but I still love it. And a lot of people online have been like talking about how catchy that is.
Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield. The blast shield,
no,
it's a blast shield. And it comes down and it goes up. Blast shield.
Then we get some surface action on the planet with these aliens chucking a spear at this Bolian ensign. So check, there's another TNG alien race. We see a Bolian. This Bolian getting stabbed. This is presumably that same planet we saw the shuttlecraft flying over earlier. If you look, you see the crystals in the background that we saw from higher up. And Ensign Mariner has the line, "We live on a spaceship. Nobody is dying from a spear wound." And this really made me think of the original series, like all the times we see primitive peoples and weapons in the original series, and them posing a threat to these highly advanced people from the 23rd century. You know, I'm thinking of like Spock getting shot by a flintlock rifle in a private little war. So, you know, I like that kind of idea of going back to that, and I don't know, it just feels very Star Trek to me, you know? And then, so we see, of course, Ensign Mariner kicking some of those aliens' butts. Gotta have our action, you know? And then this really bizarre scene with both Boimler and Mariner are presumably in their underwear, and Boimler is getting eaten by a large spider creature or something. There's also this little purple or pink pig alien next to Ensign Mariner. Not sure what this is all about, but again, I love that this is animation. I love that they can do these wild things that would be more difficult to do in live action, certainly more costly to do in live action. And it's just really bizarre situations they can find themselves in. Now, this scene here, we see Ensign Boimler, and again, he's in his dress uniform as we see. He's getting thrown by this large alien through the air. Now, I want you to look at the background of this scene, and this is a very deep cut, if this is what this is, but look at those wall panels. They're very reminiscent of the ones that we see on the Andorian ship in Star Trek Enterprise, on Shran's ship. So, you know, they're too close to be a coincidence here. I think that was definitely the reference used. And as Ensign Boimler is thrown into the air and he's kind of sailing through the air, we do see that there is an Andorian in this scene off to the side. So I'm wondering if they're on Andoria or on an Andorian ship or something like that. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So we get this bit of a scene, the canted angle on in the corridors of the Cerritos, and there seems to be a countdown going on. There's some sort of emergency happening. You see the countdown on the screens. Everyone's rushing around. We see another Andorian in this scene, so we see a crew member there, and then we see our first Vulcan that I noticed anyway in the trailer walking in this scene as well. And throughout this, apparently Ensign Boimler is walking around carefree, not really, you know, just kind of oblivious to what's going on around him. So again, maybe a bit of an insight into his character there. After that, we get a series of very quick shots of Ensign Tendi in this kind of Starfleet commando uniform. And this is a uniform we've seen before in like the TNG episodes, for example, Birthright, parts 1 and 2, Chain of Command. That's the uniforms that Worf, Crusher, and Picard wore to infiltrate Celtris 3 in that two-parter. And Ensign Tendi is fighting these Romulans here, these old school Romulans, TNG style. I'm not sure why their eyes are blacked out in this, though. That's the one part that's kind of strange. Another reference, deep cut kind of thing in this is the phaser rifle that she has on her back is the style of phaser rifle from Star Trek First Contact, and we also see it later in Voyager. And then after that, we get another funny scene where Ensign Boimler is sitting naked at this computer console, apparently expecting someone else to walk in other than Ensign Mariner. Ensign Mariner walks in maybe wearing a spacesuit of some kind without the helmet or whatever. But it leads to hilarious misunderstanding, of course, as he turns around and he's completely naked, and neither of them want to see that. Neither of them want to be there in that moment. I was not expecting to see this sort of humor with like a black censored bar covering up things, but interesting. Cool humor. It's definitely adult humor. And I'm kind of digging this. I'm liking that they're being a little bit more kind of pushing the envelope than anyway, yeah. And then of course we get the title shot, Star Trek Lower Decks, and we have to leave with one last little joke at the end. We get Ensign Mariner firing a phaser at a brig cell, the force field behind which Ensign Boimler is, and he exclaims, you almost phasered me. And she says, oh, relax, it's set to, and she realizes, yeah, it was set to stun. I really like that scene. I think if that's kind of indicative of the kind of humor that we're getting here, I'm all in for this. I'm really enjoying this. So there you have it. Scene by scene, just about every shot. There's a few that I skipped over, but just about every single shot of the Star Trek Lower Decks trailer looked at and analyzed. Was there anything that I missed? I guess I should say I also love the LCARS computer displays in the background. That's nice to see that so faithfully reused here, reimagined. And yeah, just the set design, the look of the show, the feel of the show. I was excited before, but I think now I'm even more excited. Any kind of hesitation that I had about this show, this trailer has really eased for me. I'm really excited. I feel like they're very human and human. You know what I mean? They're very real and grounded, and even though they're in fantastical situations and it's played for humor, I also feel like this show is one that's going to have a lot of heart. I feel like there's going to be genuine care for these characters by the end of the season. And, you know, animation is a funny thing because it can be played for just laughs and that sort of thing. But at the same time, it sometimes surprises you and pulls on your heartstrings and catches you in dramatic ways that you weren't expecting. I'm thinking of shows like Futurama that were very unexpectedly emotional at points. So I feel like this really has a lot of potential, and I think we're in for some really amazing and fun adventures with the crew of the USS Cerritos. So how about all of you? What did you think of the trailer? Are you more excited for Lower Decks? Are you less excited? Did you hate the trailer? Did you love it? What was your favorite part? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. We are, of course, going to be talking about the trailer on the next episode of Positively Trek that comes out on Tuesday of this week. So July 14th, keep an ear out for that. We'll be talking about this and much more in that episode. So thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I really appreciate the help of the Patreon supporters. You make these videos possible. I really couldn't do it without you, especially right now with the job market the way it is and the way things are. Every little bit helps. So even if you can only donate $1 a month, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will see you all in the next video. Take care and live long and prosper.